Hello everyone and welcome to the Activist Lawyer podcast. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm your host to this podcast, which offers a platform for lawyers to share their story and their journey into law and activism. Our guests will discuss the challenges and highlights of their work, as well as important cases, opinions on legal and political matters, and will offer up advice and tips for anyone interested in pursuing a career in human rights law, public interest law, or criminal justice. The Activist Lawyer podcast is brought to you by the Granite Podcast Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Hi everyone, something a little bit different today. I am here in the lovely Granite Podcast Studio with Roisin, who is our podcast studio manager and editor and all things behind the scenes. Welcome to your studio.
I'm delighted to be here.
Are you really?
Wow.
You're not used to being on this side of things. But yeah, you do so much behind the scenes just to make the Activist Lawyer and so many other podcasts, of course, that are recorded here happen. And yeah, we're very grateful for you. And you've been helping me. We're planning another mini-series linked to the Activist Lawyer podcast that we're starting to record over the next few weeks or so. But today we thought, the two of us were thinking, what should we do? And rather than leave a blank space, we would keep the momentum going and thought we might reshare an episode, didn't we?
We did. So we'll be resharing episode 48, recorded in October 2022. Jude Copeland.
Jude Copeland, that's right. So we've so many to choose from, but how do we think? And we both have listened to this episode recently when we're putting together kind of bit of a backlog of some of our episodes and some of the most popular episodes. And I think looking back, this episode really made me smile. And it's because Jude is a very knowledgeable lawyer, but also shares a lot with the public in general in terms of little anecdotes and pieces of history about law, activists, campaigners, and really change makers, people who stood up against oppression or took on the system. So I always enjoy hearing or reading his perspective on things. But this episode just brought me so much joy at the time when we were recording it. And I was saying to you earlier, Roisin, it's one of the first times I thought of Activist Lawyer maybe as a platform for storytelling.
Yes.
As opposed to just, interviewing people and asking them directly about their work. Because Jude goes through many examples of people who've inspired him on his career. For example, Mary Robinson, we were saying he mentions,
yes,
who is the former President of Ireland, of course, and a very formidable barrister who acted in the David Norris cases. Now, he discusses this case when Mary Robinson was the barrister. They lost this case. But the case went on, of course, to the European Court of Human Rights in 1988, and that court had ruled that Irish laws criminalising homosexuality violated Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This forced the Irish government to change its laws, and the bill was eventually signed by Mary Robinson in her role as president, which I think is a lovely kind of full circle moment. And they were also great friends. So a fantastic story, and there's plenty of other little nuggets in that episode, and I hope you enjoy them as they demonstrate how colourful and how impactful the law can be. It's not all dry and boring. And I really love this episode as it serves as a reminder of the many characters and ordinary people who help shape the law so that we all benefit. Beautifully told by Jude Copeland. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Activist Lawyer. I am delighted to be joined in the studio, which is great, in person by Jude Copeland. Hi Jude.
Hello.
So you had a bit of a journey getting here, didn't you?
Yes, it was absolutely lashing. The glorious city of Newry has never looked so damp.
It's never looked so damp. Yeah, and you had buses, trains, planes, automobiles to get here.
Oh, definitely.
And there wasn't even a scone waiting for you in this studio. How embarrassing. But we've got our tea and we've a few biscuits, had a wee chat. And it's lashing outside, but we're nice and cozy here in our studio. And again, I appreciate you joining us here. It's always better to have the in-person chats in the studio and Activist Lawyer. But just a little bit of a background. So Jude is a solicitor, advocate, and he's working in legal technology for Cleaver, Fullerton Rankin in Belfast. That's the only office, isn't it, Jude? It's based in Belfast, yeah?
Yes,
yeah.
It is.
So for existing clients, I guess, and law firms in England, Wales and Ireland. So you're a legal technology specialist. interesting. I don't think we've had anyone on the show. Well, we had a few people who were working in cryptocurrency, which might be somewhere related. But Jude is also on the Stormont All-Party Working Group on LGBTQ issues. That's really interesting. We'll get to that. And also an organiser of Queer Space, which from talking to you is just a fantastic organisation. Jude is also working with the Law Society's Human Rights and Equality Working Group and has a keen interest in diversity and inclusion. So we're going to have a chat about that as well. And gosh, with so much to talk about within your work, but also the activism and the work that you do outside your work. So we've a lot to get through, but thank you so much for joining us again.
It's an absolute honour and I'm so excited, and it's lovely to be here in Newry chatting to you, Sarah.
Okay, well, just we gave a little bit of a bio there, a little bit of a background, but maybe you might share with our listeners a little bit about your journey, how you got into the work that you're doing now with Cleaver, Fulton and Rankin, and how you came to specialise in that, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I don't know where it started. Well, I kind of do. I wanted to be a doctor in secondary school, and that was really, really what I wanted to do. And then I went to a lecture in the Ulster Museum, and it was given by a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, on the Human Rights Act. Mm-hmm. And I became really fascinated by the idea of individuals having rights and the realms and the potential and really what that means on a day-to-day basis. And it was really an incredible lecture. It was given by Baroness Helena Kennedy, QC or KC now. Mm-hmm. And I was just so inspired. And I've found that in my legal career that, I think it's really important to have role models and inspirational figures, mm-hmm. and people who have gone before you, and they will show you the way to be a lawyer and actually to be an activist lawyer. I was really, really honoured to meet Helena Kennedy a number of times whenever I was working in London, and it was just really, really lovely, meeting somebody who was so down to earth, and the way she explained law as really being like a tradesperson's mm-hmm. tools. We do use fancy words sometimes if we need to. But, fundamentally, people don't want lawyers. People want solutions to their advice, and they want advice. And no family history in law at all, really. And I just became really fascinated, applied to a number of universities, got into Ulster University and went to Jordanstown. It was so daunting. I just didn't know what to expect. And at the same time, I really started to, I can only see this in hindsight now. And I share this a lot whenever I'm going out and talking to students and, people looking for their sort of next step in their early law career. I just crashed. I didn't understand that I was suffering from a really challenging time around anxiety, and that was just linked to me not knowing who I was as a person and, not realizing. I know this will sound really odd to a lot of people, but not realizing that you're gay, because I had no role models, and I didn't know very many lawyers, and I definitely didn't know any LGBTQ lawyers, so I just really, really struggled. I became really anxious around exam times, and I just stopped going to exams. So I stopped going to exams and resat the year and didn't reset the repeats. And then eventually at one point I received a phone call and said, right, you can't. Yeah. We're throwing you out.
Oh, that's tough.
And I still remember going into the meeting, and it really was just the kindness and the support of Amanda Zacharopoulou, who's one of the lecturers there, that she saw the potential in me to become a lawyer.
Yeah. And
she gave me that support, and I got that second chance. And I eventually got my degree. I got a whole 2-2, which people are a bit sniffy about, but actually what that means to me is that I was stronger than the anxiety that kept me back.
Yeah.
And I don't know what will have happened by the time this podcast goes on air, but I started looking for training contracts in the economic crisis of 2008, 2009. So that again was pretty grim.
Yeah.
I kept getting places in the Institute in Belfast, and I kept not getting a training contract. So it was a bit of luck. I ended up training in a wonderful... I'd worked as a paralegal for a few years in incredible practices with amazing lawyers and, very, very kind lawyers who were keen to share their experience and their skills with me. And eventually I went to this tiny office in Glengormley. Ted Lavery was my master, and it was an incredible experience. It was very, very different to what I'd been in before. It was by far the smallest practice I'd ever been in. But he was really, really committed to training me about how to be a lawyer. So it was more important for me to see lawyers in action and to go down to court and sit into meetings rather than me going and doing photocopying. So I was very, very lucky.
Hands-on, yeah.
Any opportunity to go to court or to go to police stations, I was there. Any interesting applications, I was allowed to go. And there was just an incredible moment. I think, looking back on this, I think he set it up slightly deliberately. I don't know how he did, but I think he did. My first appearance in court as a trainee was with a divorce petition, and it was a High Court divorce for hearing. And I went down and I was petrified. I had memorized the petition. I'd memorized the marriage certificate, and I was so petrified. I didn't know where to sit. I realized that at the last minute, and went in there, and we were waiting around, and people say, fake it until you make it. I was trying to calm this very, very anxious client, and I was petrified. And the barrister came along and said, "Oh, there's a problem. The judge has phoned in sick." And the idea of a judge phoning in sick, I'm going, I don't really think the judges got sick. I don't know what I thought.
It sounds quite random, even though they're entitled to be sick.
I mean, they are human, apparently.
Judge phoned in sick. Oh, well.
So, really, really, just, I was like wandering around and thinking, okay, I don't know how to deal with this. Is there some application I should make? What do I do? And then the barrister came over to me and she just said, "Oh, you're in very good hands," and spoke to the client. "You're in very good hands. We've got the chief coming down to do your divorce petition." So my first appearance in court was in front of the then Lord Chief Justice. And
no better
the wheels
way.
almost came off a couple of times. But she had her moment in court, and I had my first ever moment in court, and we got what the client wanted.
Good. And I bet you felt a huge relief after that. But
oh, definitely.
There's no better way, I guess, of being thrown there in the deep end. And that's similar to the experience I had and lots of my colleagues, but other people don't get that because they don't actually meet individual clients for quite a long time into their training. So that is a real eye-opener, isn't it, to kind of have to stand there. I've had that feeling of anxiety and complete overwhelm, but there's no better way, I guess, to get you started.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as COVID has changed the way a lot of law practices work, I think what is now almost more important is how we think about how we as lawyers communicate with our clients.
Absolutely.
And the tone of emails, and just what our clients expect, because it's just nobody goes to a solicitor for an enjoyable experience. They go there because they're nervous and they have a problem.
They have an issue. But so how then did you get involved in legal technology? Is that really an emerging area in the law? What kind of issues are coming up in terms of your practice?
Yeah, it's really weird. I was thinking about this recently, and whenever I qualified, whenever I was at the Institute, actually, I remember sitting in one of the tutorial halls, one of the tutorial rooms, and so the tutor said that our reports were going to be going back to our masters, so the attendance was going to be monitored, and if you missed a number of tutorials, it was going to be reported back to your master. And we had to fill out forms. And I remember sitting, I really vividly remember, because they were all, I loved my tutorial group. They were brilliant lawyers. Well, they still are. But I remember a couple of them saying, no, well, my master doesn't have an email address. And then somebody else in the tutorial group said, we don't have computers. And I'm just going, how do you practice? How does this work? So, that's where we sort of came from. And there was, looking back on it, although I'm only sort of 10-ish years, although this is only about 10, 15 years ago, every lawyer had a secretary. And now with automation and with increased use of legal technology, it's changing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I ended up working for a global law firm in their disputes team. And it was really, really interesting, because it showed how very dull tasks like looking through discovery, disclosure, how that could be made a lot easier and kind of revolutionized by the use of technology. So it was actually it's the lazy way to do things, because instead of looking at hundreds and hundreds and thousands of documents, you can just look at the core of your case.
Yeah. And
some people say, oh, well, that's back office law.
Sure.
But whenever I'm managing review teams now, I'm thinking about the case analysis that has been formulated by a group of lawyers on, some of my cases have been hundreds of thousands, millions, and actually tens of millions. There was one very large case that I worked on, and there was a huge team on that, and it was multi-billion pounds. And it just opened my eyes to the potential of legal technology and how you can actually do things and actually serve your client and your client's interests better by using a little bit of technology.
A little bit of technology. What about the comments made recently at, wasn't it, the centenary? And they're saying there'll be no need for lawyers anymore because everything. So are you that far ahead? The comment was made about, for anyone who doesn't know, that technology will soon become so advanced that we may not even need lawyers, and there's no need for lawyers as people, I suppose, because people, have problems and they just need it fixed, and that can be done through automation. So we're all out of a job.
Yeah, not the greatest message, but I think for context, that was Richard Susskind, who in the 1980s, he was publishing his PhD thesis on AI, so he's like so far ahead. But I think the point that he was making, I don't know how well it landed in that group of lawyers, was that there are some things, and we do them as lawyers, and they don't make much sense. I think my one of my pet peeves is, tradition for tradition's sake. So one example of this, and it's a minuscule example, but it really irritates me, is a lawyer writing to another lawyer, and the first line of their letter. So first of all, it's a letter. Like, why do you want to delay a response? But the first line of their letter is, "Dear sirs," so obviously, not really gender inclusive. Your client, our client, and then the name of the matter. But then the first line is, we refer to the above matter. And I am yet to meet a lawyer who can explain to me why that line is there, because it just doesn't make any sense. Of course, they're writing about that client matter.
I'm doing a little bit of training today with some of our staff who will be supporting me, but that is just going to be sticking out now for me when we're doing letter writing and how to kind of set our letters up on our case management. Yeah, stroke that out. It's not necessary.
Well, you see, you're already using legal technology. You're using case management.
We do. We're up there, although I'm the worst in the world at managing that. But I don't think I'm a dinosaur. I'm not that bad. We're getting there, and I do see the efficiency of it and the benefit of it now. It took me a while to get there because I did come from old, traditional methods, but it's definitely starting to work for us now. But yeah, I mean, there's so much wasted and documents and files, paper files, absolutely everywhere freaks me out now because we don't really do that in here.
Hazards.
Yeah. Tripping hazards and fire hazards. Yeah, I'm just thinking of the firms I worked for years ago in Dublin. You'd be into literally you'd have this much space, like a square, because the rooms were piled up with decades old files and folders and papers, and you don't really see that as much anymore. Well, I'm hoping you don't, but maybe you do in other practices. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's really weird. I joined Cleaver Fulton Rankin at the start of the year, and whenever I was coming down here, I thought to myself, I'm not even sure if we have a fax machine. And I remember, even 10 years ago, your contract was sent by fax.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to send a fax anymore.
I don't know if we have one. Is there such a thing? See, I just remember that wee noise now, that little ringing noise through. Yeah, because everything came in through fax and litigation. You're just waiting for the other side to say, yeah. But I don't. Yeah. No, we don't do faxes in here. So yeah, but so aside from your day job, I guess you're extremely busy with the legal technology department and group within Cleaver Fulton Rankin. You are also equally, if not even more active, I don't know, outside of work. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about your projects outside because they're truly inspiring, truly interesting, and maybe how we can look at maybe diversity and equality in the legal workplace based on your experience and your thoughts on that. So one of the organisations there that you mentioned was the Stormont All-Party Working Group on LGBTQ issues. Now, is that group working, or what way is it at the moment with everything going on?
Well, we were actually all there a couple of weeks ago. It was a really surreal experience being up at Stormont, because obviously it's not sitting at the moment. Yeah. And there were a number of politicians who were there, so good. To their credit, they were present. But it was really just, I mean, I think as a lawyer, you're used to representing people, and you're used to representing people in relation to cases, taking instructions from them. But actually, this type of thing is about leadership and about talking about the things that are important to the people that you represent. And it's broader and it's a bit different. And a few of the things that I mentioned during that meeting hadn't been mentioned by anybody else. Yeah. And they were about people who were truly voiceless. And although I have a commercial sort of practice and legal technology practice, what I really like to do is that bit of activism around giving a voice to people that otherwise wouldn't have a voice, and using my position as a lawyer to share their stories, albeit most of the time it has to be shared anonymously. Sure. But it's giving people that platform.
And talking about sharing voices and giving people that platform, what is the landscape in Northern Ireland in terms of, I know you've been working closely with kind of patching together our history in terms of LGBTQ plus issues. Obviously here we're very focused on you know, our historical past and the troubles. But you mentioned that you've been looking at, you know, issues from, was it from the outset of the troubles. How's that going in terms of the history project that you've been working on in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I got into it and thought that it would be a little bit of a hobby, that I knew most of what I was going to learn. I already knew it, but actually there's a whole rich tapestry of history that hasn't been captured yet.
What's the name of the project?
Yes, so the LGBT History Project is a sort of joint exercise by the Rainbow Project, Cara Friend, and Here NI. And really, it's ended up being a really exciting and interesting and really rich experience for all of the people involved. Because if you think about it, we all know about the history of, you know, our various institutions and the various groups, and both legal and illegal, during the conflict here. But actually, for most of the conflict, LGBT people were criminalized. Yeah. So that meant that their stories couldn't be told as an act of self-preservation. You know, the first bar in Belfast for LGBT people was the Carpenter Club, and we can't find a photo of that. The outside or the inside. The
Carpenter Club, okay.
Yeah, and it's an insight into a very different time.
Sure.
And it makes the achievements that we have got now a little bit sweeter, but also we have this history project which will capture the stories of the people who were actually there.
Excellent.
And during lockdown, we had incredible webinars. Really?
That's a good time to have done that, I guess, is it? Yeah. Is that where the project started? Was it during lockdown?
Yeah, it was supposed to be, you know, one Zoom session, and then we would go back to be meeting in person, and then obviously COVID hit.
Yeah.
So all of us were sitting in our houses with nothing better to do, and people were joining from all over. And we had these incredible, rich stories because the people who were there were joining our Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And it was really daunting.
Amazing.
Because we were talking about, you know, criminal issues. We were talking about discrimination and prejudice. And people were sharing really interesting stories that haven't been written down. And they were sharing photographs that they had. And in lots of people's closets, there are incredible things, like that we ended up getting the first telephone that was the helpline of Cara Friend, and that was the first LGBT organisation in Northern Ireland, and it's going to be 50 in a little while. Right. And actually, you know, Cara Friend, all of the organisers of that were arrested. Pretty much, and that is what led to Jeff Dudgeon taking his case to the European Court of Human Rights, and it was like that phone service that ended up in litigation and human rights. And you know, the reason why I can be, you know, I can walk down the street as openly gay, and I can actually practice as a lawyer, because a lot of people forget that if you were gay, you couldn't be an officer of the court. And I think that I find that incredible.
Gosh.
And
this is not that long ago.
No, and you know, I sort of think there are a number of practitioners, like a small number of practitioners, who would have dealt with cases under the pre-1982 law. You know, not very many now, but there are still some lawyers.
So before decriminalisation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's hard to get your head around that. And that was in our lifetime. That was not long ago at all. So leaps and bounds have been made in some respect. But in your opinion, you know, do we have far to go? Are we there in terms of, you know, building and creating this society of complete inclusivity? Or what has your experience been with, you know, people who maybe have contributed to your project or that you work with?
I mean, I think it's different for each person and for each workplace. I think how any business treats an LGBT employee is a good bellwether of how decent they are as an employer. And employers include law firms because they have employees. And I think that what I find really quite sad, and I think we have to work a lot more on, is that people at the beginning of their career, or people who are changing roles, sometimes they do go back into the closet. So in one firm, you know, they feel supported and they feel able to be themselves. And then, you know, they start their first qualified job, or they start a new job and they go back into the closet. And, you know, National Coming Out Day is the 11th of October. And people think about coming out as being, you know, a one-off thing, that, you know, you just do that and that's the end of it. As a person, you know, I'm making a decision whether or not I talk about my boyfriend to my colleagues on a daily basis. If a client says, "Oh, were you doing anything nice at the weekend?" I have to make that decision. Is it appropriate for me as a lawyer? Have I got that degree? Like, what is my relationship with that person? So it's coming out is just a constant process for people.
And I wonder, like, you do see a lot of businesses, you know, will, you know, celebrate Pride, for example, and have committees, especially law firms as well. You see them, some of the corporate law firms will have equality and diversity groups. They're trying to, what can businesses do to be more supportive? So that example you gave of somebody who felt supportive, you know, came out and then went back into the closet, as you said, to start a new job. How can we stop that from happening? And how can that person maybe feel more supportive? Is it just dependent on the actual culture of that company, or should we, you know, be supporting some kind of, I don't know, guidance that people should sign up to, or some sort of mandate? How might we address that, do you think?
It's a really, really tough question. I think that people will feel supported and able to be themselves whenever the people around them show that they are supportive. And, you know, I've seen some really, really powerful shows of allyship. In one role, I was the head of the Diversity and Inclusion Network, and we were planning Pride, and I thought, we don't have that many LGBT people. So how do we give our straight colleagues the permission to show their solidarity? And, you know, in a non-threatening way, how do we do that? Because sometimes you have to show people, yes, this is okay, you know, this is the words that you use to describe these things, this is what's appropriate, this is what's not appropriate, here's a little thing that you can do. And I remember being really nervous, and I emailed a couple of our sports teams. We were having a sort of five-a-side against some other organisations, and I said, well, you know, this is actually going to be happening quite close to Pride. How would you feel about rainbow laces? Do you want them? And everybody wore rainbow laces. And there was only one person on the team who was LGBT, but all of the people wanted to show that they cared about LGBT rights. And that was just, that's only a small
act. So it leads me to think sometimes corporations and businesses, I guess, who, you know, celebrate Pride Day, maybe it could be seen as a box ticking exercise in some cases. And I'm not saying that with everybody, but really on the ground, there's little acts, you know, and personal engagement with your colleagues, senior management, whatever it might be in terms of whatever industry you work in, that would make that person feel supported, not just the company saying, you know, we support Pride or whatever it might be. Is that the case, that really it's those kind of, you know, smaller acts, or, you know, the people might not necessarily feel supported just because a company say that they're inclusive and open to, you know, or is there a fine line there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be authentic. and I think it has to be meaningful, because if it isn't, it's not really achieving anything.
Yeah.
It may get a couple more sales, but you know, people are going to see through that, and actually there's a risk there that LGBT people could become alienated because, you know, they're just wheeled out for certain occasions, which can, you know, you're exposing your employees in a way that it's maybe not helpful.
Okay, well, there's a lot of work to be done potentially there. And just in terms of your work with the Human Rights and Equality Working Group, I know that they're very active. We had one of the members on before, Maria McCluskey. What issues are you looking at there in terms of, you know, our peers and people working in Northern Ireland in law?
It has been a really wonderful experience working with these incredible people, and we just look at any policies that come across our desk, and we also respond to individual solicitor members where they raise an issue or a concern. So it's a really organic group in a way, and we've been very active. We've recently completed a diversity and inclusion survey, and that has been
through.
Do you know what like, we can't change things until we know what we need to change. We have to have some sort of awareness about, you know, where the issues are. And that's been really, really incredible. I think we don't exist in a vacuum. So there have been a number of policies brought in or proposed to be brought in by the UK government, which have very serious human rights implications. You know, recently the ones on legacy, the redrafting of the Human Rights Act, you know, these are fundamental to individuals' rights. And, you know, we do work with the society, and, you know, we're so well supported and well.
That's brilliant. It is. You can just, it's very good.
And it's also so rewarding. I didn't think that being involved with the Law Society would be, I didn't think that it would be for me, and I didn't think that I would have anything to contribute. And yet I'm working with these incredible human rights lawyers.
Making real change. Well, that's great. And even for all of us to know that support is there for lawyers across Northern Ireland. And one thing you were involved in recently, which I thought was fantastic, and unfortunately I couldn't be there because I was in London at the time, was Pride Belfast this year. And lawyers got together who represent, wasn't it asylum seekers and refugees? And I think I'm right in saying they were pretty much leading the parade at one point. How did that come about?
So Lawyers with Pride have participated in Pride for a number of years, and they're just an incredible group of LGBT people and allies who work in the legal profession or who are law students as well. And I remember turning up to it was actually my first Pride, and that I took part in, and I didn't get the memo that everybody was supposed to be in court dress.
What did you wear?
So I mean, it was only a shirt and jeans, but everybody else was a real lawyer, and I wasn't.
They were lawyered up.
It was really wonderful. But yeah, Lawyers with Pride have participated for a number of years, and have also brought over incredible speakers. Like the late Lord Kerr and Master Victoria MacLeod, the first trans judge in the UK, who's incredible. Well, both of them are incredible. So the incredible thing about Belfast Pride this year was, for many, many people, this was their first Pride, because we didn't have Prides because of the necessary coronavirus restrictions. And it was just, there was a lovely atmosphere. People were dying to see each other and feel that sense of solidarity. And there would be a number of people that I would only ever see sort of at Prides in, you know, Newry or Omagh or Belfast. And what was really special this year was a small group of individuals, a grassroots group made up of people who work with asylum seekers. They invited me to come along and meet their queer asylum seekers. And I explained I explained the meaning of pride and what to expect and the history of pride. And of all of the presentations that I've ever given,
Yeah.
I have never had the level of attention that I was given in that room.
Wow.
These people were coming here, they didn't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I think for queer asylum seekers, the issue for the people there was they were in shared accommodation, many of them, so they could not be out as being LGBTQ.
Yeah.
In wider society, they couldn't be out as being asylum seekers.
Mm-hmm.
So as an act of self-preservation, they were keeping themselves to themselves.
Sure.
What we did, we had this lovely mask making session, and the asylum seekers who have come to this country for our protection, and we should be honoured by that.
Yeah.
They made the masks of the countries where it's still illegal to be LGBT. And they were going to wear those masks for their first Pride. So I explained to them about Belfast's first Pride, the history of Pride, individual rights and freedoms, and how they've come around for LGBTQ people. And it was just really, really incredible.
Yeah.
And Belfast Pride heard about it, and they invited this group of petrified but very, very brave people to actually lead the parade.
Wonderful.
So they were the people who were leading it.
Amazing.
And, you know, we can't hear their voices. Yeah. These people have a very difficult path, even now that they're in this country and away from the harm in that country. There are still harms that are a risk for them.
Sure. Wow, that is it's just fantastic, and a great way to bring back the celebration of Pride. So finally, gosh, I mean, you're so busy and so involved, Jude, in terms of campaigning and really creating a safe space for people in Northern Ireland, you know, from all backgrounds. One organisation or project you can explain about a little bit more that we mentioned, which I find just fascinating, is Queer Space that you spoke about. And it provides, I guess, a safe space, which is what we're talking about, for people across Northern Ireland who haven't come out, who maybe their family see them as straight, but they come to this group meeting and, you know, feel supported by maybe the only people that they're able to talk to about their authentic self. How does that work out?
Yes, a few years ago, I just felt that I should be doing a little bit more and giving something back. So I started going to Queer Space meetings, and really, it's this kind of, it's a bit of a rubbish chill out room with sort of sofas that are falling apart and, you know, a ragtag bunch of people and really horrendous dilute orange juice that I think should really be banned. But the important thing and the empowering and the powerful thing is that this is a group of people who come together. So Queer Space acts as a safe space for people to come along and to be themselves.
Yeah.
It's really, really bittersweet that there are a number of people who cannot be open with anybody else in the world on occasion. Except that group.
Wow.
And during lockdown, it was incredibly difficult for LGBTQ people. And they were incredibly isolated. They were in difficult positions, and they had challenging relationships. And it was a pressure cooker for a lot of people.
I'm sure.
And we tried to keep up contact to combat that isolation. It was a bit of a nightmare organising so many Zoom sessions and trying to think of interesting and fun things to do. I think we only had about 2 Zoom quizzes the whole time, but we tried. Oh yeah,
I
they
think
were
you've been doing
painful.
enough during lockdown. I feel very ashamed speaking to you about my restriction time and how it was spent. But yeah,
But sometimes
anyway.
it was survival. Survival was enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm sure the people who benefited from that, even the Zoom, and I know it's different to have the in-person meetup, but I'm sure people benefited massively. And didn't you say people from all over the world were actually chiming into those sessions?
Yeah, it was. Oh, it was really. So at our normal meetings, we would have people from,
Yeah.
as far as kind of Limavady, Ballymena, and down
Yeah.
in Newry as well, who would travel up and be with us. But during lockdown, there were a number of people who had sort of heard about us, and we're not really sure how they heard about us. But I remember one guy joined, and he was in a car park, and he was in the Middle East, and
Right.
we were the first people that he came out to. And that was only made possible because of technology,
Yeah.
which is incredible. We also, through a queer writer, we ended up working a lot with some refugees in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, and that's a camp run by the United Nations, and there are a number of queer people who are at risk,
Yeah.
who are either refugees from other countries in Africa or displaced within that country, and they really formed together for security, and they had a number of grievances in relation to other people and the homophobia, prejudice, discrimination that they were facing. And, we tried to support them, and I worked with a couple of them in terms of formulating their arguments and teaching them little bits of advocacy.
Brilliant.
And it was really, really heartbreaking because we knew that they were at risk, even though they were under the protection of the United Nations. They were still at risk from other people and from locals and people within the camp. And really, I was devastated to have a missed call, and then to find out the news a couple of days later that one of the people that I had worked with, who really dreamt of being a lawyer, and working in human rights, that in the middle of the night, this wonderful gay man called Trinidad, homophobes came in and actually covered him with flammable liquid, and he ended up dying.
Oh my goodness.
Really, it was very, very... It really galvanized the importance of the work that we do.
It really, really does. Wow. God, that was so hard. It must have been so difficult for everybody working within that group. But it just shows the reality, that this is still a massive issue and people are genuinely living in fear. So the fact that you're able to reach out and provide people who are aspiring lawyers with those skills that they might not necessarily be exposed to is amazing. So wow, Jude, you're just doing fantastic work throughout, for us obviously in Northern Ireland, but further afield obviously. And just, I suppose it's Activist Lawyer, our podcast, and you're very much an activist lawyer, or an activist and a lawyer, both. So just for people listening, what does that mean to you? How important is it, I guess in general, but also from your perspective, to use activism as a change maybe to impact law? Do they mesh well together? Do you see them as separate kind of mechanisms? What are your thoughts?
I think there's a bit of both. I think that the law is just a set of tools for the practitioner. I think activism is fundamentally about showing that you care about something.
Yeah.
And, my sense of activism is about, honouring the people who have come before me in, a variety of fields, and also, basically leaving my little corner of the world a little bit better whenever I leave. And we just, there's so much potential with activism. Thinking about how individuals engage with rights, it doesn't take a legal education to do that. It just takes curiosity about law. And, there are so many just inspirational people that I sort of listen to whenever I'm feeling a wee bit down.
Yeah.
And law is sometimes really a bit bad, and it needs to be challenged, and it needs to be sort of assessed where the margins of that is. We saw, one of my favourite lawyers is Mary Robinson, and lots of people think, oh, she is wonderful. She was the first female president of Ireland. She was really, really amazing.
Yeah.
But if you actually look into her background and the cases that she acted in, she acted for her friend, Senator David Norris, whenever he brought the Irish state to court, and they ended up losing, actually. And what I really love about that story is they lost the case before the High Court in Ireland, but then eventually there were a number of motions that were brought, and it was decriminalised, and by that stage Mary Robinson was able to sign in the bill as president, so she was able to achieve something as president that she wasn't as a lawyer. But I think the incredible story, and I just, do you know what, I'm just fascinated by her, and I think it's about curiosity about the law. There was a Cork woman called Josie Airy, and I really love sharing her story because I think it honours her name, and it also sort of reminds us to be a bit activisty in whatever tiny way that we could be. So Josie Airy was she had a number of really, really low paid jobs. She also had an abusive husband, and he was very violent towards her, ended up going to prison. But divorce wasn't legal in Ireland at the time, and it was a very, very difficult time to be a woman or to be any type of minoritized individual in Ireland and in the UK at that time. But what she did, I think, is just incredible. So she knew that she needed something. Her husband got out of prison and she wasn't safe. She couldn't get a deed of separation. She couldn't get a divorce. But she had heard about a thing called the European Court of Human Rights. So she actually just wrote directly to the European Court of Human Rights and said, this is what's happening. I need to be safe. I can't pay any of the solicitors in Cork because I have no money, because I make very, very little. But I need protection. I need to feel safe. And what can you do, European Court of Human Rights? And they actually wrote back and said, yeah, there's maybe a tiny bit of an arguable case here. We're going to actually give you funding to bring a case.
Oh, goodness. And
she picked Mary Robinson as her counsel.
Wow.
But that's the foundation of civil legal aid in Europe. This one woman,
that's amazing, from
Cork, and I
did not know that.
I absolutely love.
What's her name again, Jude?
Josie Airy. I think she was technically called Joanna Airy, but Josie Airy.
Fantastic! Wow.
And that just shows the potential that one person has.
Oh my goodness, that is fascinating. Well, all of the examples you've given today and just your journey itself is just amazing, and I'm sure of real interest to some of our listeners. And I follow you on LinkedIn and I can see certain things that you're up to, but it would be great to check in with you again and follow you for, all of the work that you're doing. I know you're on Twitter and you're on LinkedIn, and hopefully that I'd like to find out more about the History Project as well in Northern Ireland. It just sounds fascinating. So, thank you so much again for joining me today.
Oh, it was really, really lovely, despite the torrential rain.
Despite
it was
the
wonderful.
weather and the lack of scone. That scone didn't arrive yet, I see, in the studio. Next time we'll have a proper welcome, proper Newry welcome for you. But again, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.